I think if I were to go back to talk to my younger self, I would say number one, you don't have to go at it alone. Go ask for help and get support because there's so many loving people around you that would 100% support you and help you through difficult situations.
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
Welcome to another episode of The Making of a Coach, where we unpack how coaches, facilitators, and trainers turn their passion into profession. I'm Toby from MetaFox, and today I am with Kristen Harcourt from Toronto. Kristen is an executive coach and speaker and helps leaders elevate their emotional intelligence. On this first out of two episodes with Kristen, we'll explore how she built her business on the back of podcasting and a strong social media and networking game. Let's go. Great, Kirsten. So in order to get to know you on a high level, I was wondering, who is your typical client today and what challenges do you help them with?
Yeah, so my typical client is I'm supporting leaders, and that can be emerging leaders, not quite in leadership, just moving into leadership, all the way to senior executives and CEOs within organizations. And in terms of the challenges, I would say my typical leader is a high performer, and they are individuals who tend to be type A personalities, so very goal oriented, driven, and ambitious. And along the way, a lot of wonderful strengths, but they have some blind spots. And those blind spots look different for each leader, but they tend to be very related to elements of emotional intelligence. And so some of the common themes I see in terms of struggles are they might have very strong expertise, subject matter experts, but now they're leading others. And so they're leading humans. And humans have lots of different ways that they need to be supported. And so learning how to adapt and be able to connect and be able to give feedback, constructive feedback, ask for feedback, coach, mentor, develop, delegate, those kind of things can be struggles that show up for them. I also see leaders who might have gotten to a point where they can't be the doers anymore. They can't be the worker bees. They are high level now and they have to be very strategic. And that can be difficult because now they're leading through others. And there's a bit of grieving. They have to let go some of the elements of their job that are no longer parts of their job. They have to coach others to be able to do that. And that can be a big challenge. Being able to delegate and be able to help others, be able to have a lot of accountability can be a struggle. Sometimes with my female leaders as well, being cognizant of not having too much empathy. So where there's some empathy fatigue, they're taking on too much. But I see this with some of my male leaders as well. So what does it look like to really integrate that compassion and empathy, but then also make sure that there's ownership and accountability and that assertiveness is being used? And where I'm meeting them is based on their particular journey and where they tend to have those specific struggles.
Okay, nice. Then I would like to go back in time a bit and invite you to do a small exercise at this point. I'm sending you a link on the chat.
Okay.
And you can join me here on our small Icebreaker online tool. And there's a question in the top, and that is, which picture represents your beginnings, the early days as a coach?
I love it. So many beautiful pictures.
And we have your picture. Would you like to describe it to us?
It looks like a mom sitting on a beach with a young child, a little girl sitting beside her. This jumped out at me because I think I became very clear that I wanted to go on this path and become a coach when I became a mom 15 years ago. And for a variety of reasons, becoming a mom was one of the most meaningful and beautiful gifts of my life. And I became even more conscious of how I wanted to show up as a human for my children, but also for the world, for the community, and being able to have an impact. So when I see that, I think of, for sure, my daughter and, of course, my son now too, how they've impacted my journey. I also have a special place in my heart for water and the ocean and the beach. So I gravitated towards that as well, and nature and sunsets that just makes my heart very happy to look at that as well.
And this is Toby from after our interview, briefly interrupting. As you've noticed, I ran a short picture card exercise with Kirsten using Icebreaker.online. Icebreaker Online is a small online tool that you can use to a large extent for free to get clients look at their issue from a new perspective with the power of pictures. You can find the image that Kirsten has chosen on the cover of this episode. And as I've made it already a small tradition at the Making of a Coach, I'm wondering, do you actually enjoy these small exercise interruptions, or should I rather cut them? Let me know in the comments or text me on tobias@metafox.eu. Either way, you're welcome to try Icebreaker.online in one of your next sessions. And with that, back to the episode. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Can you take us with you in that space in time? How did your life look like? What were you working? Where were you living?
Yeah. So it's interesting when you go back and connect the dots. I realize I've been coaching my entire life, but I didn't know that was called coaching. Even as a young girl, I was coaching my mom and coaching my dad and being able to, like, so many things that I was doing. And I didn't realize because I didn't have language or even understand coaching as a job and that existed. I did definitely have the entrepreneurial itch probably for a long time since my 20s, but I didn't grow up with anyone who was an entrepreneur. So I just was surrounded by very, I want to say, risk adverse people. They're like, you get a job, you need to make sure you do the same thing, you have a paycheck every 2 weeks, and all of the things. So I followed that path. However, I started to become clear, like I was saying, becoming a mom 15 years ago. Around that time, I started to work with my own coach. And so I got some exposure to what coaching was like. She actually reflects to me back then when I started coaching that she says, I see you coaching. But as I got further into my corporate career and closer to when I did end up taking the leap for my entrepreneur journey, I just had this deep desire to become a coach. And so I did do my coaching program, all of that, while I was still in corporate. And just telling myself I was doing that to prepare for the future at some points. But then as I got closer to getting to the end, or it was actually towards the beginning, but just realizing what this coaching was all about and just changes that were going within my organization and just my deep inner knowing, I took a leap of faith. And one point in December 2016, there were going to be some changes to the way the organization was going to be run. And I remember having a conversation with my managing director, and I said, I think this is it. I think this is the time. I think I'm ready to take the leap of faith. There are no fears of my intuition and my whole body. My heart is on fire and goosebumps throughout. And that's how I felt when I was doing it. I'm very glad I did it. It was one of the best decisions of my life. And I do have to say, after I made that decision and start going into it, it's still a lot. Like starting a business and learning all of that and figuring it out. I did have enough people, luckily, in my network, in my community, that had told me it takes 2 to 3 years to grow a business. So that's what I had as my frame of reference. That gave me a little bit of space and permission to know that it's going to take a little bit of time and you have to grow it. You have to plant a lot of seeds and do a lot of watering. But for me, I needed to see that it was continuously moving up in the right direction every year, which it was. And that's what kept me, I guess I would say I had the faith and the trust that I would get to where I needed to get to.
You were just describing this moment when you essentially, if I understood that, telling your manager that you would be leaving to go freelance as a coach. What led you to this point in time?
There was just like a very deep inner calling that this is the work that I'm meant to do. For me, it wasn't just coaching, it was also speaking and training. I was just very clear that I need to use my voice to make positive change in the world. And it was this deep inner calling that I couldn't ignore anymore. It was like a little itch. And then finally it was like, come on. It was really getting my attention and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I do remember, it's funny as you're asking this question. So it was December when this happened. I was at a conference in the fall of 2016. And there was a big group meditation. I think there's about 200 or 300 people all in this room meditating. And I closed my eyes, and in the meditation, I heard, it's time, you need to go start your business. I did hear that very loud in my meditation.
Wow. Okay. How else did you notice it? The call.
The calling is, I describe the calling as an inner knowing. And I was doing things, I know with you, Toby, you're a planner too. There were things that I was doing in terms of planning. Like I've been having lots of dialogues with people. Every time I would meet an entrepreneur, I would beeline to that person and ask all the questions like, tell me about your business. What did you do? How did you do it? When did you know? What were the signs? So I was doing a lot of, when I'm about to do something, I realize this now, but I start to get into research mode, right? So I start to have dialogues and ask people a lot of questions. I would listen to podcasts and watch videos on YouTube and read books about entrepreneurship and starting your business and things like that. So I was also doing some researching to see what would this look? Could this be possible for me?
That's super interesting. And I'm wondering, when was that point when you said, I'm ready now? You said you have this inner calling, you felt it, and
Yes.
tangibly, in terms of skill set and business
Mm.
setup, point in your career, how did the world look like tangibly that you saw, okay, now is the time?
Yeah, for sure. I think those are some great questions. I was set up at the time that at that point, my former husband and I, he has a full-time salary. So that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. It's not all of a sudden that I'm leaving and I have no safety net, right? I do have to say, when I was in that meeting and said I'm doing it and took the leap of faith, I hadn't told him I was going to be in that meeting that happened in the moment. I don't know. Would I do things differently? Like I would have, I'm a type of person that would have liked to have a safety net and I had it all planned and I had started the business building. I hadn't done any of that. So I had that dialogue. And next thing, it's like January 1st, here we go. I'm going to start a business. I definitely had the confidence in my skills. Like I had worked in the people and culture space for many years at that point. While I hadn't finished my formalized coaching program, I had been doing debriefs and coaching people informally without having my formalized coach training for many years as well. I got lots of very positive feedback around it. So I know that I was good at it. I know that I got the results. I know that people came back to me and said, all of the things that they did because of those conversations that we had. So I definitely had done the miles and I had the confidence that I felt like I knew I could do it. And I didn't know all this building a business. I didn't have any of that framework yet. It didn't get created until I started.
So, in that sense, this was an ad hoc decision, but maybe for context, if I understood that, you had worked before in sales and marketing in the manufacturing industry, and then afterwards
Yeah.
for 9 years as an HR consultant, which I imagined involved
Mhm.
already a lot of coaching
Yeah.
or coaching as in people development, let's call it like that. What would you
Yes.
say were the key skills that you had picked up on this journey so far?
So I think one of the things that is important to highlight, specifically coaches, when I was working within that organization doing the consulting, I was an intrapreneur. So I was the one that was being the practitioner and working with them, but I was also doing the business. Like I was bringing in clients and doing a lot of different things from a sales and marketing lens. And in previous roles as well, what has made it much better or easier for me is I love sales and marketing, right? With some people, I see some coaches who are incredible coaches, like them doing their work, but they don't want to go out there and build a business. Whereas to me, I love the challenge of it. And also, I recognize I have strong trust in myself and a strong understanding that when it comes to new business development, sales, and marketing, I'm going to do that in a way that energizes me. And there's so many different versions of how you build a business and how you do sales and marketing. And so, what made it better for me those first 2 years is that I got to do the things that I'm naturally good at, which is building relationships, which is speaking and getting business through speaking, which is going on podcasts, going to networking events. They energize me and they have a return on investment. They have an ROI. So, it's a good use of my time. For me, I don't enjoy the whole online world where I have to create funnels and you need to put people in funnels, and that just doesn't speak to me, and I haven't done that. And for other people that does work, but I think what has been great and beneficial for me is that I know what works for me. Continue to do what works for me. I do it consistently, and that is something that comes naturally and is a skill set. I don't think I recognized at the time how lucky I am to have that skill set, because I find a lot of coaches or people building their business really struggle with that.
So, you were working in sales and marketing. in that role, you were able to basically have the on-the-job training in being on trade fairs, building connections,
Yeah,
closing deals. All of that you learned as an employee, actually, in the quote unquote safe
exactly.
environment of an employment. And I think what Pam said also was like she identified, I think in her case, it was the one on one coffee meetings as her sweet spot, the kind of world where
Yeah.
she really thrived and that she really enjoyed. And in the same way, you say for you, it was the networking events, the sort of bigger settings that you then really leveraged and said, okay, let me leave the whole funnel building, online marketing bit aside and let me focus on that craft that I learned as an employee that you also used as a coach.
Yes. And you're right. I'm so grateful because I got to be in a job for 9 years where I was getting to be paid as an employee, but practice and learn all of those skills so that I could. We created a podcast then too, back in 2015 within that organization. And which I also saw how much I love that and how effective it was as well, which made it easier when I got to the point where I started my own podcast because it wasn't this brand new thing. I knew what it looked like and felt like because I'd already been doing that.
I'm still wondering when you said, when you had that leap of faith conversation with your manager, that was during the time as an HR consultant. How was that time useful? I think that was also 9 full years as a consultant. What did you learn
Mhm.
during these
Mhm.
times?
It was huge because working with organizations globally across all industry size, sometimes we were working with companies who had 5 to 10 employees. Sometimes we were working with organizations who had 10,000 employees. It's amazing because you're getting to learn about all these different industries, challenges that are specific to industries, how they go about supporting them. However, what was so interesting across all industries, the themes and the challenges were always the same because it always comes down to the people, right? It's funny because the organization would be like, we're very unique. We're not like other companies. Like with us, it's this stuff. I'm like, no, I heard that with all the other companies, right? Like they're the same kind of challenges, right? That are showing up no matter what. You hear a lot when you're starting a business that you have to niche down, you have to figure out. And what I realized for me, it's not so much about niching down. I actually like my expertise is emotional intelligence, and I can take that anywhere because it's across industries. Because when it comes to challenges around emotional intelligence, it's not unique to one industry, it happens in all industries. And I have the data to support that in that I worked across organizations and industries and I was seeing the same themes and challenges every day. Right? Like different industry, different company, exact same. Sometimes I would hear the exact same challenge. And one industry is I'm talking to a financial company with 10,000 employees. The next, I'm talking to a small company with 10 employees, professional services, but the exact same problem.
And the time as a consultant enabled you to see many organizations in a relatively short time span and be able to build those internal patterns, helps you to then identify problem areas. When did you decide for emotional intelligence as your thing?
As soon as I left, I had been using those skills even within working there. I wasn't always labeling it as emotional intelligence. I would say the human skills. We need to humanize the workplace. We need to have these human skills. If I was using a language that would be common for individuals and organizations to understand, emotional intelligence helped them get there. So that was right from the beginning. I was doing training and keynotes. I didn't bring the assessments in as part of my practice until 2020. So the first part of my coaching and training, I was talking a lot about this, but I wasn't bringing assessment tools into it. And then I had that complement my practice as of 2020.
That's interesting. So you started calling it human skills. Today you say emotional intelligence. How has that language evolved? And then what do you see has worked? What works nowadays? How is your experience there?
Yeah, as soon as I started in 2017, I was using the language of emotional intelligence. I would say before that, like 2010 on, I heard people saying all the time soft skills. And I was getting tired of hearing the whole thing soft skills because whenever I heard soft skills, it almost was like it wasn't giving it enough credibility. Like it wasn't valuing how important it is. Oh, we have these soft skills, like they're nice to have. And I was like, these are not like when you say it like that, you're not giving credence to how critical these are. These are the critical skills. These are the communication skills. These are the human skills. So I would be talking a lot about that. I would bring up anytime I would hear soft skills. Can we please stop calling them soft skills? Because I feel like it's undermining how important they were. I started to feel like there was a shared language in organizations and out in culture around emotional intelligence, and they could wrap their head around that. So that's why I started to use that languaging.
Mhm.
And I continue to use it. And I find that organizations get it. What I do find is they sometimes think emotional intelligence are some elements, but they don't understand, which is why I always like to highlight those 5 different buckets, because I don't think that many people don't understand all that emotional intelligence entails. They might know some elements, they might understand the self-awareness piece, they might understand empathy. Empathy has gotten a lot out there in the landscape. I think it's getting a lot of attention, but I don't know that they always realize that assertiveness is a big part of it. I don't know that they know how much stress is connected to emotional intelligence and self-regulation. So I'm still continuing to educate in that part, because I don't think that even when organizations or individuals are using that language of EQ, I don't think they know all that it entails.
And the EQ model in particular really gives you a nice presentation in a way where you can say, look, dear business customer, this is emotional intelligence. This is not only fluffy, soft communication stuff, but it is actually things like stress management, decision making as well.
Yes, it gives it more credibility.
Yeah. Do you see any evolvement in the language being used when it comes to the rise of AI, changes of workplace? How is that in the recent 1, 2 years?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation, of course, like every single conference I go to, there's many sessions on AI. It's definitely very front and center right now. I would say, if anything, what I continue to hear emphasized is that with AI, it was even more important. Like now, this is where we need to be conscious of. There's going to be certain things that AI is going to be able to optimize and create efficiencies around. And what it can't do is help to build relationships and communicate effectively and all of that, those elements of what happens with interpersonal relationships. So if anything, I feel like that's being highlighted even more. Yes, let's give AI these things that don't require interpersonal relationships and interpersonal connection and conversations and all of that kind of stuff. It can be creating some wonderful efficiencies. I think like anything with AI, we want to make sure it's in the right hands and used in the right way. And that can be incredibly beneficial. And I don't think the EQ is going anywhere. And I think if anything, it's going to be even more important.
Yeah, great. Thank you. With that, I would like to zoom in a bit more on your current business. I think I heard on another podcast that you have a private practice on the one hand and you do corporate coaching on the other. What
Yeah.
does that mean and how does that look like, this differentiation?
Yeah, I would say at this point around 70 to 80% is my corporate practice, and then 20 to 30% is my private practice. I just like to have some spots continuously available to individuals who are seeking coaching. I price it a little bit differently, of course, than I'm pricing to corporate, and like to make it accessible for individuals who are paying for it out of pocket. The individuals who tend to seek out coaching on and through the private practice are individuals who might not be feeling very confident or happy in their current workplaces. So it wouldn't make sense for them to go ask for their organization to support them and sponsor them when part of what they might be discussing in coaching is an exit strategy. So that can be a big piece of the individuals who are seeking coaching on their own. And I find the people that tend to seek coaching from me on the private practice end are either individuals who are very clear around what does success actually look like for them, what's their definition of success, and then how are they creating a personal and professional life that actually reflects that. Because some of them are very ambitious type A personalities and realize they've sacrificed a lot of their life for their job and they no longer want to do that. They want to work for a culture that creates more work life integration and want to make sure that they're prioritizing what really matters to them outside of work. I have individuals who seek out coaching who are other entrepreneurs and also want to figure out what it looks like to be able to up level their personal and professional life and make sure they continue to have a lifestyle that is balanced. I hate to use the word balance, integrated, because balance feels like you get to this perfect balance, but it's integrated in a way that is true for them as well. Because what can sometimes happen is people leave corporate, become entrepreneurs, and now all of a sudden, the same behaviors that happen in corporate, which is some of that hustle and spending a lot of hours working, some of that kind of work addiction, it now translates the same in entrepreneurship, but even more because they love the work they do, but they're still in this work addiction. And so they're trying to figure out ways to be able to integrate in a more effective way. Or just figuring out, like, what do they actually want? What do they truly want? Are they in jobs and careers that are actually aligned with who they are and what they want to be doing? And sometimes they do a career pivot and realize that they want to go in a different direction and do work that's going to be more meaningful for them.
So the private practice means exploring more themes of change and career change, while the corporate practice is more on the classic leadership challenges that we also talked about.
Exactly.
In both cases, it is the client persona is the same as in leaders from English-speaking countries.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
private practice simply means I come as an individual, I pay as an individual, and corporate coaching for you, which is 80% you mentioned, is the company. Basically, you have a business customer, and then there's several clients probably within that. What does it mean when you close a corporate coaching customer?
So I would just say in my overall practice, the highest number of coaching clients I like to have is a max 15 to 20 clients. 20 is actually getting even a little bit high for me. I think my sweet spot is really having around 15 clients that are coaching clients at a time. And then I also have, of course, I'm doing some consulting. I do a lot of leadership development training, working with executive teams. I do a lot of work with the executive team working really well from the top and then setting that culture. And then I'm doing training, going and doing emotional intelligence training and keynoting. So it's that nice balance. And in terms of organizations, I work with many different companies, and some I work with multiple people with coaching, and that just continues, right? Another company, I might have 2 or 3. There have been times where the coaching practice is full and I would have to have a waiting list because there's just too many spots, because I have to make sure I'm at the space that I don't want to say yes to too many coaching clients and not being able to be available for some of the other work that I do as well.
Yeah. And when you say 15 clients in parallel, earlier you said like you speak with them roughly every 2 weeks. So that's 7 coaching conversations per week.
Yeah, because we have cancellation. So if you looked at my calendar this week, I think I have maybe 8 or 9 coaching sessions. Then the next week it might be 4, and then it might be 5. It feels each week there's at least 10 coaching sessions a week, I would say, around that. Because with organizations, I might also be doing EQ 360s with individuals who don't go into a full coaching program. So I have those going on. You've got coaching clients at different stages, and then you have other work that you're doing separate from coaching as well that are sometimes one-on-one work as well.
You're saying you have a waiting list. That is for the private practice or the corporate or both?
Right now I'm good. Like I'm at a perfect rhythm where I have space. I could maybe take on 2 more. It like always balances out for me, I would say, over the last 4 or 5 years. As somebody that's wanting to come in, oh, it's perfect. One person just ended. I have your spot. There's this equilibrium that happens. I don't do anything to create it. Just happens organically. There have been some times over the last 3 or 4 years where once in a while, maybe I'm working with an organization. We've had 5 clients all start at once. So it's like I'm very full, where I've had to say, there's a waiting list for right now. In about 3 months, I should be fine, just because I'm knowing there's too much all happening at once. And maybe I'm doing a lot of training at the same time. But in general, there tends to be this wonderful equilibrium that happens naturally.
Sounds amazing. Yeah. And I would love to explore that. Like, how does that email magically arrive into your inbox? What is actually behind there? I would love to explore that a bit more. But to close that mental paragraph of your private and corporate practice, you mentioned earlier that there's 2 different pricings. The private practice is a bit cheaper. Would you like to share some ballpoint numbers, just orders of magnitude? What's the difference?
Yeah. So I won't say my pricing out loud because there's a huge range, but I would just say my private practice is 50% less than what corporate would pay, just knowing that person is paying out of pocket.
And then I guess you sell the entire journey, not the hourly session, or how does the packaging look like?
I don't have any hourly pricing, never had hourly pricing from the beginning, because it's really not an hourly model. You're paying for a program, and that program is going to go on, this individual is going to go on that journey. So I don't even think of things from an hourly, how much is things are hourly. And I find from organizations, they don't either. Like the organizations that I'm working with, at least, it's very much that they're paying for an engagement, and this is what's going to happen as part of this engagement.
Nice. For both of these practices, you basically have one website, right? There's, I think, KirstenHarcourt.com. So both of these practices, they find you through the same website.
You got it. It's for a variety of reasons. They're still seeking coaching, but it's definitely speaking. And that's why the kind of work that I'm doing with organizations has to resonate with them. If not, then they wouldn't seek it out, for sure.
Let's go back to that email that magically arrives in your inbox whenever there's a client finished. Do you have a sense, like, how does the person writing the email, how did they come across you? How did they know about you?
Yeah. First, I do consistent actions every day, every week that are business building, business development actions. And I like to describe it as I'm planting seeds, watering the seeds, but I'm not attached to when they're going to blossom. And so that's what tends to happen, right? It might be somebody who's been, listen, I've had speaking engagements or coaching engagements have come from people that I met back in 2019, but they're following along on LinkedIn. They're paying attention to what you're doing, and the timing is right, and you're the person that they think about. I think that's why it's important that you're staying front and center. You're going out there and making sure that you're promoting your business and what you're about, and people are getting a feel for who you are. One of the things I really love about the podcast, some people will say, oh, I love what she's all about. I love her energy. I resonate with her. And then someone else will be like, I don't like her energy. Great. I'm not your person. I'm not supposed to be out there supporting everyone. And the beautiful thing is there's lots of different coaches out there. And that's why I think it's so important when it comes to chemistry and values and all of that kind of stuff, because I know there's certain organizations that I'm going to work with and they resonate with me and the way that I approach things. And if they don't, then we're not going to have a very effective partnership because we're not going to see things the same way. So when I see that email, while it might feel like, oh my gosh, this came out of nowhere, it's random. It's not really, because I know that I'm taking consistent actions every day, every week, every month, and you just don't know when it's going to lead to something. And so when those things happen where I get someone approaching me about a speaking engagement or approaching me about training or approaching me about coaching, I know it's because I've built trust with them and they've been following along and they know what I'm about. A need showed up for them on their end and they felt like I'd be the right person.
And you mentioned one of these ways that you build trust and that you allow people to feel your energy and get to know you is the podcast that you're running yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, the podcast is my passion project. The podcast started in 2019. I had thought it would be really interesting to start doing interviews with CEOs. So I would just talk to CEOs that are for progressive organizations and really believe emotional intelligence and humanizing the work. And so I did a couple of interviews, not in a podcast, and then I did a blog post. Several people after they saw the blog post said, I love the blog post. You should create a podcast. You should be having conversations with these CEOs and HR leaders. So that's really what it came from. It's people reflecting back to me. I started off not even doing a podcast. I started off doing video on YouTube. And then my audience again said, I really love it. I tend to listen when I'm at the gym or when I'm going on a walk. It should be podcast format, not just YouTube video format. So that's where it emerged. So the podcast emerged in October of 2019. I am so passionate about this message and what's possible when we create these human workplaces and the responsibility both the individual and the organization should have with utopian social responsibility, right? I just feel so strongly about that. And I thought if I do a podcast, it's a way that I can be getting more of this information out to people in a larger way. And people who might not have the same accessibility in terms of the organization that might not be investing in this way when it comes to training and coaching and keynoting and things like that, that this is another way that they can get exposure to this. And then HR leaders can be hearing from other HR leaders that are doing this very effectively so that they can be bringing it to their organization and doing it. CEOs who are not convinced yet might hear other CEOs that are talking about this and why it's so important, and they might be convinced to do some of this. And leaders also will hear this and realize, oh, you know what? Maybe I could be showing up a bit differently. Oh, I didn't realize that that's part of emotional intelligence. And then hear a story and they think about, I just did that yesterday. And not to shame them, but more to invite them in that there's another way of showing up that's a lot more effective, that's going to work better for you and for the organization. And so it's been going really well. I love it. I love having the conversations. It feels very fulfilling. From my perspective, it's making that impact because it's getting in front of people that might have not been able to hear these conversations.
So we already mentioned that you do this to enable people to get to know you. But what I hear now is also, it is also an educational resource. You mentioned the people from organizations who may not have the resources to book you. Then at least they can follow you and your practice in a way on the podcast. Then there's the CEO that you mentioned that hears from another CEO. Actually, this is useful. It enables them to maybe go on their own journey of organizational development. And at the same time, they hear maybe a customer testimonial, right? Because you might be interviewing my clients that you have worked with.
Yeah, I haven't had as many of my former clients on as guests. It's been more because I like also meeting new people that I've never met, or sometimes it's friends as well who are doing amazing work. Like Pam Ross is a mutual connection of ours for sure. She's been on the show. It is. You're absolutely right. This is why I love the podcast so much because it's multifaceted. Right? I get to have impact. It gets to do many things, right? It gets to be a form of education. It gets to be a form of influence. I also have a goal of being able to amplify marginalized voices on my podcast. So when it comes to people doing incredible work in the DEI space, it's been very important to me that I have a platform and I would like to give them an opportunity to be able to use my platform to amplify their voice because maybe they wouldn't have accessibility. So that's part of it. It's people getting a feel for what I'm about and who I am.
Which also makes it harder to answer the question, what's your goal with the podcast? Sometimes people ask me that now. Yeah. You also do solo episodes, right? Not only interviews. What is your content strategy? How is the life cycle of a solo episode?
Yeah, the solo episodes have been very popular, and I've been noticing a lot of people are downloading them because I think it's bite size. Like they're usually under 25 minutes, so they consume them a bit faster. The goal with solo episodes is I talk about topics and themes that I'm seeing in organizations that I'm hearing in my coaching sessions. The other thing that's so great is that then I'll do that topic and then one of my coaching clients will come with something and I'll say, "Oh, it's so interesting. I just did an episode last week on that. Let me send this over to you." So that's another way that they can be getting some quick education on a particular theme too, which they love. So the solo episodes, the topics that they come intuitively or through me hearing themes or just something I'm just noticing like it's bubbling up on me and I want to talk about it.
Do you have some KPIs top of mind? What is it that you're looking at? Is that followers or number of streams? How has that evolved and where is it right now?
If you asked me that question when I first started, I was very focused on vanity metrics and I need to see the number of downloads and how many people are. I don't really focus as much on that anymore. I want to make sure it's continuing to go in the right direction, right? That I see that if I see certain episodes where I notice there's more downloads, I take note of it and think, okay, there's something about this topic that's more resonant for people. So how might I want to expand on this? So I use it more for being conscious of what is resonating with people. If I'm seeing that it's resonating with them, how can I continue to have more information to share with them on that particular topic? And as long as I see it moving in the right direction, like if I all of a sudden saw like the numbers were going up and then all of a sudden they were going down, I would say, "Ooh, what's going on?" I also was conscious from the very beginning that I'm not doing a weekly podcast. I just did not have the bandwidth to commit to that. And I knew it would start to become a should, and I would feel a bit frustrated if I was forcing myself to have to do it weekly. So from the very beginning, it's always been a bi-weekly podcast. For the first 2.5 years, I was pretty consistent with biweekly. And then after around 2.5 years, I gave myself permission to take a month of the summer off. And then it got to the point that if it's crazy travel happening, that it might be 3 weeks in between sessions. Like I started to feel like I've created a bit of a community, and they don't have the expectation that because I'm not a weekly podcast and I never have been. So they're not like, oh, where's your podcast? It's supposed to be happening weekly. If you listen to people who talk about doing podcasts, like people are in this space and educating on podcasters, they would all tell you, you have to do weekly, you have to do biweekly. I choose to listen to what feels right for me.
Feels good to hear you say that. And I guess what makes the difference for you is also you have been around for a long time. If I now discover you and I want to get you on the podcast, I have probably hundreds of episodes to choose from. So I guess you also now are in a different space than somebody who's considering to start that a business building practice.
You got it. Because at this point, I think there's 123 episodes, right? So sometimes people are going back and say, I love this episode. And then I have to remember it's one from 2020. But from their perspective, it's brand new. They're hearing it for the first time. I remember someone talking about that from a research perspective. Once you get to the 100th episode, there's a momentum that gets created because even when you're not releasing, people are still going back and listening to other episodes. And then that momentum continues for there. So your goal is to get to 100 episodes and then you've made it.
What would be your advice for a new coach starting out and maybe being a podcast enthusiast as a listener and now considering that as a strategy? Is it too late? Is it now exactly the right time? What is important to note? What was your most important takeaway that you would like to pass on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say it has to come from a place that you're super passionate and this is very energizing. It can't be a should. Oh, somebody has told me that if you want to build your business, you should do a podcast. But there isn't a strong drive and energy and enthusiasm and passion behind it. I would say don't do it because it does require consistency and commitment and to be energized and wanting to do it. And you don't want something that's going to drain your energy. If that does exist for you and you feel like I have something I want to share and I have maybe even a certain lens and a way you want to go about doing it, just the way you've done with your podcast, right? It's niched down in a way that there's a certain lens and a certain audience and there's a certain perspective and a certain way that you want to approach your conversations. I go and do that. Don't feel like, oh, there's so many podcasts out there. What's the point? Why should I do a podcast? I'm just like everybody else. There was another stat that I saw around the number of podcasts that only do the first 10 episodes and leave. So even though it might feel like there's a lot of podcasts out there, there aren't necessarily a lot of podcasts that went in and stayed and were consistent with it. So I wouldn't at all don't feel like it's too many people doing it. I would just say, are you super passionate about it? What's the unique angle that you want to take? How are you going to differentiate yourself? Make sure that you're staying consistent. I would encourage to do episodes with guests, but then if you're coaching and wanting to build a business, also do solo episodes. And especially if you want to become a speaker too, which can be very helpful with coaching, solo episodes get a feel for you and your expertise and how you approach that, which can definitely lead to more coaching and speaking business.
So finding your sweet spot again, approaching it as a marathon in a way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Another topic that came up earlier when you said, yeah, there's these clients maybe they have been following you since 2019. And I think you said they've been seeing you on LinkedIn. So here, this is another important channel. What is it that you do there?
Yeah, so I definitely feel like social media is important if it feels good for you. I think some people don't want to be on social media, so I'm not going to tell you you have to go on social media. I enjoy it. I'm very boundaried with it. So I'm not on there all the time. I'm not scrolling. That doesn't feel very good for my mental health and mental well-being because there can be a lot of divisiveness and it can also feel like a lot of noise if you're constantly on there. So I use it in a very proactive, strategic, intentional way. And definitely I have gotten lots of opportunities through the work that I've done on LinkedIn. And to go back to what you said with the podcasts, it's a marathon. It's a proactive, long-term strategy. It's not like you just create a post out there and, oh, I have all these clients now with this one post that I wrote. You're out there, you're using your voice, you're getting opportunity for people to understand your voice and what you're speaking about and what your message is, and doing that consistently. And you'll resonate with the people who you're meant to resonate with. LinkedIn gurus are teaching people where people are posting like every day, twice a day. I don't think that's how I would recommend that you approach that platform. I think if you were putting out great content a couple of times a week, that's more than enough.
And how do you approach it? Like maybe on a scale from I post once in a while when something comes to mind to, okay, I really have this structured backlog with posts that are roughly drafted. And once a week, I sit down and schedule posts. How does that process look like behind the scenes?
Yeah, I'm not on that side of the spectrum. On the other side, I would say my rough goal is a couple of posts a week, which usually always happens because I have once a week as my podcast post. If I'm ever doing a speaking engagement or things like that, I put posts out. I also go through phases where I notice I'm on there more often than not, just based on what's going on in bandwidth. I am not someone who has a content calendar and is saying every week I need to have my 2 posts. I'm definitely not as structured, more of a spontaneous style. I do find the people who have the content calendars are more structured like that. A lot of my community who are doing that as coaches, it tends to be they're not the one doing their posts. They've hired someone who's doing the post for them and having that structure and doing the content calendars. And when you work with a company, they definitely want to have the content calendars and know what's going out. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing. I've considered even having somebody do that for me and have someone that's putting the posts out twice a week. And of course, with my voice and being part of contributing to it, it's something I've considered, but not seriously enough that I've actually spoken to anybody about doing that.
And what have you learned works for you in terms of content? Which sort of content, which sort of posts gives you engagement or possibly even leads to business, if you can track that some way?
Yeah, always storytelling. They want to hear stories. Like the more that you can bring either your story or the stories of clients or the stories of others so that they can emotionally connect with what you're saying, those are always my posts that get the most. Also, if I'm bringing in something that I'm teaching an organization around an event, I will also talk about here's where we went into, here are some of the themes that we talked about. Those are definitely ones that really engage. And sometimes if it's just a post, those tend to bring stories, but even just posts where I'm sharing parts of myself and being vulnerable, those tend to get really a lot of engagement as well, because they want to get to know who are you as a person.
Is there any advice you would give to your younger self, either the very young person or also the one that's starting out as a coach?
Yeah, I love that question. I think it's such a powerful one. I think if I were to go back to talk to my younger self, I would say, number one, you don't have to go at it alone. Go ask for help and get support because there's so many loving people around you that would 100% support you and help you through difficult situations. I would say trust yourself for sure and that you have so many answers. To be honest, there have been a lot of catalyst moments that I'm so grateful for my parents that they actually gave me a lot of autonomy and allowed me to make important decisions and trust myself. So it was there, but I guess I would just reflect, you have it, trust it. And the last thing I would say is just surround yourself with loving and kind people as well, right? Because those are the kind of people that are going to inspire you to show up as your best self.
Okay, thanks so much. Is there any question that you would like to pass on to our next guest?
If I was going to pass on a question to your next guest, I would ask them, who were some of your role models that had the biggest impacts on who you are today?
Nice one. Thank you. I will take that into my next conversation next week. And for today, I say thank you so much, Kristen Harcourt. And that's it with the making of Kristen Harcourt. After a few had already asked me about social media strategies in the past, I was happy that Kristen shared her experience with us. What I took was, number one, choose a medium or a channel that you enjoy. In Kirsten's case, I guess that was podcasting, and to some extent also LinkedIn and networking in general. Number 2, keep going either way because it is a marathon. I think Kristen also made that one pretty clear. And number 3, define your mission and your niche. Kristen didn't make that third one super explicit, but if you check her website and her social media, both linked in the show notes, you'll find that she's really all about emotional intelligence. And this is also the topic that we referred to a few times in this episode, but it will be the actual main topic of our next week's episode, again with Kristen. Kristen ran a small demo coaching with me after I had filled Kirsten's go-to tool, the EQI Emotional Intelligence Assessment. And I can already tell you, I learned that I still have quite some way to go with my EQ. So if you're curious about Kristen coaching, tune in next week. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and leave us a rating on your favorite podcast app. I'm Toby from MetaFox. All the best, and until next week.